Good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar. Tonight's topic is about DIY super or self-managed super funds as you may know it. Today we have joined forces. We've joined with Azure Group and also McCarthy Group. So joining us from Azure Group is Norm Howell. He has over 25 years experience in financial services industry and in particular self-managed super funds. And also alongside him we also have Stephen McCarthy, Managing Director of McCarthy Group, whose company creates wealth through investment properties for their clients. Now before I hand over to the gentleman and get started, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to fill out the questions pane on your right hand side pop out. Once we do that, towards the end of the webinar, I'll collect all the questions and we'll have a formal response from both Stephen and Norm and will be emailed to everybody who has attended. Also, just bear in mind, this information is general, so each individual person has their own specific needs. So if the time comes and you want either Norm or Stephen to give you an in-depth consultation, we're more than happy to at the end of the webinar. Now that we've got the red tape out of the way, please welcome Stephen and Norm. Take it away, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome everybody and thank you very much for joining us here today, and thank you for that introduction, Dennis. Now Norm, I just want to kick off. I came across this great quote the other day by Albert Einstein, right? And Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. Now we're about to go into some pretty, superannuation is a pretty complex subject, and what we're going to attempt to do here today is to do basically a book summary on War and Peace, aren't we?
It's exactly right, yeah, and thanks for the invite to come along. It's great to be here.
You're welcome.
Yes, superannuation, self-managed super funds, all that sort of stuff. Yep, so let's really take it from the basics, Stephen. I think it's the place that we should start. Let's have a look and see really just how does super work. So let's have a look. For every dollar that basically someone earns, 9.5% of that, it basically is deducted for super. So before the money goes into the fund, of course the government's got their hand out for a bit, 15% there, and that comes out. Then the balance is generally invested in the traditional way in managed funds, some share trusts, cash, a little bit of property, that sort of stuff. Then the fund basically, hopefully, earns a return. And then the earnings and the capital gains are basically taxed, and the income is taxed at 15%. Then the managers of the fund, they take out their fees, and basically you're left with a net amount. That then just keeps on going until round about when you're going to retire, and then at that point people can access their super and either take it as a lump sum or as a retirement income stream known as a pension.
Okay, well when you put it like that, it's all pretty straightforward, isn't it? It's, the Australian superannuation system is the envy of the world too, isn't it? That we've regarded as having one of the best super systems out there, pension systems.
Well, that's exactly right there, and in particular, you know, in relation to the amount of money that's in super now, it's $1 gazillion. Can I say that? It's $1 gazillion.
Yeah, $1 gazillion.
Yeah, that big number. And it just keeps on growing because, you know, as people go along now, we've got a really good system. And today was about educating people about what they can do with that.
Okay, well let's just for a moment, let's just before we go into DIY fund, let's again just spend a little bit of time looking about the existing how existing funds work, and so people then can draw a comparison between how their industry fund is working and how perhaps a DIY fund can work with them. So first up, for somebody that's currently in an industry fund, who chooses their super fund manager?
Well, it goes into two parts. Generally, they do. It's a bit like going shopping for your health insurance. You know, where do I go? What's good for me, and all that sort of stuff. So you need to go and do a little bit of work. But some particular arrangements are driven by what they call a mandated award. It means that you don't have a choice. You must put it somewhere else. But generally, people have got their choice. It's just member choice now. You can go and get what you like.
Okay, I look, I certainly know in my company, when we go to make our superannuation payments on behalf of our employees, we're depositing monies up to at least a dozen or so different superannuation companies. So people can choose their funds, just like you do your health fund. So yes, that is one of a choice, and that was only recently been introduced, isn't it? A choice of funds.
Yeah, member choice. That's exactly right. So it really is in the hands of people, whether they go here or they go there.
Yeah. Okay. So now, once again, in the traditional fund, so the money goes in there. Where does that money go to?
Good question. It's traditionally invested, and it's invested by professional managers generally in some cash, some fixed interest here and offshore, some Australian shares, international shares, and maybe a little bit of property and maybe some exotic things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Yep. The big question is there: will that super fund grow?
It's more of an intention. I mean,
an intention.
An intention.
Yeah, that's the outcome they want.
Well,
right?
That's exactly right. So the answer is maybe.
Maybe.
Okay. Maybe. You know, all things being equal. Most markets grow over time. It's a question of which market you're in, why you were there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say is that you can assume they will grow, but the next question is will it grow so much that will be enough? In other words, will that super fund provide you with enough income to maintain your existing standard of living? And I think for most people, certainly the most investors that I come across, that is their stated outcome. They'd like to retire with enough money to maintain the living standards which they enjoy today. So really that is the question, will superannuation do that? Will that be enough?
Well, my professional experience has been sadly no. Because most people don't really plan for retirement. I think there's all sorts of surveys out at the moment that suggest only around about 10% of people take advice or they have a plan for when they retire. So generally it's not. So anything you can do to put money into super or to make the underlying investments in super grow is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's worthwhile saying though that superannuation is actually not designed to maintain your living standards. It's simply designed that you don't starve. In other words, you meet a minimum standard of living.
Yeah, not if people come and see me. That's a plug for me. No, you're quite right. Superannuation is a subject, because it's so far away, a lot of people don't have interest in it. It's something that just happens. But when you start to sit down and look at what you want to achieve over your life, I mean, you see it every day. People say, I would like to retire on $70,000 a year. So I'll ask you, Stephen, how much would you need as a capital sum if you retired today and you needed 70 grand?
You're putting me on the spot there, Norm, but...
well, how about I tell you?
Yeah.
I did this the other day.
Mm-hmm.
About $1.5 million.
Okay.
And that would be in today's money.
And in today's money.
Yeah, and when you talk to most people, they don't have balances like that. So anything you can do to make that balance bigger, the closer you get to retirement, is a good thing.
Okay. Well, I suppose that's why we're talking about managing your own fund, doing it yourself, and harnessing the power of leverage inside that super fund, which we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about now, right? Okay. So those cover some of the how superannuation works at a basic level, and that's how for most people, this is exactly how their fund is running. They do have the choice of their fund manager. They don't necessarily have a choice as to where their money goes inside that fund, and sort of sitting there with their fingers crossed, hoping that the fund manager is going to do a great job and they're going to bring them enough money.
Yeah, that's basically right. Many of the funds themselves, the super funds themselves, do have options, but generally people don't seek advice about that. And you're right, just I'll go and tick this box or I'll tick that box. It's unusual that we come across investors with their superannuation that have got a plan around it and they actually follow the markets.
Okay. All right, let's have a look at the DIY self-managed super fund. Do it yourself.
Before we get in that, Stephen,
yeah.
We were talking before we came on air, and you've got a whole bunch of statistics about self-managed super fund.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well,
I just came across them the other day, so I thought that might be interesting. So first up, there are 520,000 self-managed superannuation funds, and they're growing at a rate of 7,000 per quarter.
Are you serious?
7,000 new funds set up per quarter.
So how many people would that be all up, you reckon?
Well, at the moment, the numbers that I've got here, so there's over 1 million people that are in self-managed superannuation funds.
Is that right? 1 million people?
Yeah.
And what would that be as a percentage of the people that are working, do you think?
Well, they didn't quote that number, but I'll just do some back-of-the-envelope calculations. If the working population of Australia is just under 9 million,
Yep.
9 million working Australians. If we've got 1 million that are in their self-managed super fund, that's sort of just under 10%, isn't it?
Well, it's probably a bit more than 10%, just as well I do all the numbers, yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
around the other way, just over 10%. Yeah.
So you've got 10-12% of the population who are walking and basically saying, I want to take responsibility or something. They don't want to stay where they are. Are these wealthy people that are doing all this?
Well, I don't know if they're wealthy people, but they say that in the self-managed super fund sector, they've got $550 billion that they are looking after. Now, just put that into contrast. Our national debt is just over $500 odd billion. So there's enough money in self-managed super funds to wipe out our national debt. So I suppose that gives us some size and some scope of the market, and certainly people looking at setting up their own super funds. They're not the lone rangers. It's obviously more and more Australians are deciding to take control and look after it themselves.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in our business at Azure Group, we see a lot of people coming in through the doors now that want to take control of their arrangements, and in particular with super, because they want to go and do things they can't ordinarily do.
Yeah. Now, it's also really good to see is that, with the budget just handed down last week, or rather this week, that there was no changes made to anything in relation to property investment, and nothing was changed in self-managed superannuation funds or superannuation per se, certainly no change to negative gearing. So that was it's good to see that they left that alone, so we have some stability there.
That's right. I did a blog just after the announcements came out, and the message for us was that there was no changes other than a little bit of a change to make it better for people who have terminal illness, which is a good thing. That starts in a few weeks. But outside of that, the message was that self-funded retirees have to take responsibility for themselves. So, the whole notion of, is a DIY right for me is becoming at the front of a lot of people's mind now, because they're questioning, if I don't take control of this and do what I'm doing, what's actually going to happen?
Yeah. Okay. So we've looked at that point one there, is that what is DIY super? That's simply you're managing your own investments. So number two, so how does it work, Norm?
Yeah, good question. It's pretty straightforward process these days. Just by way of background, a super fund's a trust, so it has a trustee with a bunch of rules. As you'd expect, it has a trustee, and that means you have to set up a company. And then for people who want to go and use leverage, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, borrowing, there's another arrangement that's set up as well. So essentially it's pretty straightforward. Money in, it's managed, and money out at the other end. So it's pretty simple, and particularly when you've got experts that are looking after it for you, it just means though that you're more informed.
Okay, now straight up there, that actually did sound quite complicated to me, setting up a company, setting up some trust and stuff.
That's why you have to use experts who do that for you. It's quite straightforward.
Okay, so while it's a DIY fund, do-it-yourself fund,
yeah.
There are people that can actually help you, and like people obviously like yourself that can help you not only set it up with the ongoing running of the fund.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, people use this word team, and that's exactly what happens. So basically there's some people there that are supporting you. That's why in the DIY these days it is relatively easy.
Yeah.
You don't do the book work, you don't lodge the tax returns, you don't do all the compliance. You actually outsource that, but you're responsible for it.
Okay, so I know that people must feel, what about fees and charges here? But I'll just sort of point out, we won't get into that detail right now, but I will point out that in your existing traditional fund, a manager charges you fees and charges for running your fund. So there's no real difference there, is there?
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because one of the things that we do when we put these arrangements together, we're actually forced to go and find out what someone's paying today. And then we compare it, what they're likely to be paying in the future. And I got to tell you, people get shocked when they realise what they're paying today.
Okay, so we've got a bananas for bananas comparison, huh?
It's exactly right, but I will say that particularly when people buy something like a property or whatever, that over time the costs are cheaper because you're not paying a percentage of your money the way that you do now.
Yes, I get that. Okay, so so where can people? They've got their own fund set up. What is the rules? What are the regulations allow them to invest in?
Basically, these days, so long as you're using sensible approach to investment, you can invest in most things. But people, why I see people when they come and we work with them, they want to actually buy a direct asset. They want to go and buy a property, or they want to go and buy direct shares, or whatever it might be. It's because they have an interest.
Or their business premises, for example?
It's exactly right. We do a lot of transactions in that area where super funds, they actually buy the commercial premises of businesses.
Okay.
So but you get that sort of ability that you can't get in an ordinary fund.
Okay. I said earlier that this is quite a big topic, and we're just giving it's like what we're trying to do here today is give a book summary of War and Peace.
Exactly.
Just trying to skim over some of the, all the detail, because we could be here all night. We don't want to be doing that. Okay, so the point 4 is that what are people's options here in relation to, say for example that someone said, yeah, look, I want to invest in a property, but my super balance is say 250,000.
Yep.
Now, by the way, when I say super balance is 250, some people might be thinking, well, I don't even have that amount. But if you're a husband and wife, for example, and you're both working, you can combine your super balances, can't you?
That's a really good point. We often see partners coming together, bringing their super together, and to set up a self-managed fund, and they want to go and buy a long-term investment.
Okay, so let's say that's $125,000 a piece.
Yep.
So they now have a lump sum in their super of $250,000, and let's say they want to buy an investment property of say $500,000. They've got 50%. They've got 50% of the money that they need. It's still not enough. So what do we do there? What's you want to tell us about how?
Yeah, this is one of the exciting things of being involved with a super fund, is that a self-managed super fund is that you can actually use a thing called a leverage. In other words, you can borrow through a special arrangement, and it gets a bit technical, I won't go into that, but basically it allows the super fund to go and borrow money in a special way to make up the difference, and that's where the leverage is. So Stephen, the big difference here is someone can have $500,000 working for them versus $250,000 in the traditional way in their ordinary super fund. And it goes to what we were saying before, that a lot of Australians still struggle at the other end, or don't know how that they can actually use their super to have more at the other end.
Yeah.
And this is one of the ways and the techniques.
Yeah. So and it's, to some extent they're doubling up on the money that they're investing, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's very similar when someone goes and buys their own home. They put down a deposit, they borrow the rest, but it's their entire home that's working for them. This is exactly the same in their super fund.
Well, that sort of brings me to who pays the loan? Who's paying the loan back to the bank?
Well, that's a really good point. The tenant pays money to you. You pay your interest and all the things that you need to, but it's the thing that is going to be putting in there all the time. It's your 9.5% that the employer is contributing, and that's what's going to pay down your loan over time.
Okay, so just go back to our first slide there when we talk how super comes in. Yep. 9.5% of our salary currently goes into a managed fund, and this way we can put that same 9.5%, and that can go towards servicing the loan that we buy the investment property with, right?
That's exactly right. So your superannuation contributions is what's really going to pay down the loan. And then you know how people talk about positive gearing. That happens too, because the rent goes up over time, and you use that money to pay down your loans.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so let's now have a look at really is that well, that covers off our fifth point, doesn't it, really?
Just as one other little thing I'll add there, Stephen, I should say, is that I often have people saying, well, as I get older and I want to pay down my loan faster, how do I do that? Mm-hmm. And there's a very tax-effective strategy called salary sacrifice, where you give up some of your pay to accelerate putting money into super, and that helps basically drive down that loan.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean that's a very tax-effective way of doing things, isn't it?
It certainly is, yeah.
So how does someone work out whether or not they should salary sacrifice?
it comes down to a couple of things. People that have got surplus money or a little bit older and they don't need their money, then why pay the normal rate of tax? How would you like to pay 15% tax instead of paying your normal rate? And at the same time using that money to pay down your loan. So that's really how it's worked out.
Okay. All right. So, okay, let's now touch a little bit on the benefits of running your own fund. So, to touch, Norm, I'll just take you up to the first one there. We're talking about control. So,
sure.
What are the benefits of control there?
Okay. Control here, it means that when you set up a self-managed super fund, you're doing it deliberately. You're going to have interest, and the control is you're now going to be deciding the investment strategy. In other words, what are you going to invest in? Why are you doing it? What's your objective? So that's the first thing. You're going to control the outcome as best you can. And so that's a really big deal. The other thing too is that because that you are very much involved with the investments, you're controlling what's going on. And then there's some other benefits that I won't go into, but there's some very nice estate planning benefits that can actually come out of this that you can't get normally. Okay,
so with control comes visibility?
It's exactly right. In other words, you know where your money's invested, you've got an eye on it, and you have a great strong interest rather than these two pieces of paper that come every year. And the first thing you do is look and say, this is altogether too hard, there's 10 pages of whatever, and it gets stuffed in the drawer. I often talk to people and say, well, you know, how much you got in super? Oh, I don't know. Where's it invested? Oh, I don't know. Have you got insurance? Oh, I don't know. And what would happen if something happened to you? I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because that sort of takes us to a bit of a psychological issue with superannuation. And what I mean by that is that when I just heard you say, I don't know 3 times. I don't know where my money is going. I don't know how much it's worth. I don't know how much it's going to deliver to us. But it's quite crazy, really, when you think about it. For most Aussies, their superannuation, that's going to be providing the income they're going to need when they stop work. Stephen, but we've got all these things there we call I don't know.
Yeah, so, and it's people's often it's their second biggest asset. How much have you got? Don't know. Where's it invested? I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So why is that? And I talk about the psychology, and you know, the theory is that because people aren't taking any direct control over it, because it comes straight out of their salary, they don't see it. There's a feeling of detachment.
100%. That's exactly right.
There's a disconnection between they actually don't believe it's their money. And while they're holding that belief, which is largely false because it is their money,
of course,
because they don't have any attachment, they can't influence any of the outcomes of it. They don't really fully understand how it all sort of works. Then they don't see it as their money, and therefore there's why there's this lack of interest in it.
And that's right, and that's why having your own self-managed super fund, one of the things it does, it makes you accountable.
Yeah.
You sit down with the team at the end of the year and go through the accounts, you know what's going on.
It sort of puts you in the driver's seat, doesn't it?
100%, that's exactly right. So I would go to our clients that got their self-managed super fund, say, where's your money? You know what, every one of them can tell me what's going on.
Yeah, because, well, I can tell you, I own number 15 Johnson Street in Annandale. I know the property, I pick the manager, I select their tenants. The manager does all the day-to-day stuff, but I'm the one that ultimately makes the decisions on whether to hold it, to keep it, to sell it, increase the rent, renovate it, whatever the case may be. You do have all those choices, where it's opposed to if I've got my money tied up in a big fund manager.
You don't know.
I'm just a passenger in the bus, right?
That's exactly right. And it goes
passenger in a very big bus.
It's exactly right. It's a great big pool. The difference is you really know with your own self-managed super fund, you've got control, you're holding yourself accountable, and it's very, very visible.
Yeah. Okay. So another benefit there is asset protection.
Yeah.
And holding assets inside a super fund it's pretty well much the most protected you can be. Would you?
That's exactly right. There's certain laws that say that, and I'll use a bit of a technical term here, your benefits are inalienable. In other words, you can't give them away, they belong to you, no one can ever take them. So if someone was to be made bankrupt because of whatever reason, or many small business owners set up these arrangements, at least you know that that asset is going to be protected.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're working in a profession that you could become personally liable for a bad outcome, you know, it's often that you could lose your home if litigation was started against you and you were found to be negligent. Then, you know, your family home's at risk. Again, I'm assuming that your professional indemnity insurance couldn't or wouldn't cover you. But any assets inside a super fund are protected from those sorts of outcomes, aren't they?
They certainly are. So that. Yeah. I mean, this applies to all super, but inside your self-managed super fund, particularly if you've got something leveraged, then it means that it's still all protected.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it's a major benefit for people that are self-employed or professional people, that they have very, very strong asset protection in their superannuation.
Exactly.
Okay. It's also tax effective. Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah. Being tax effective, what that happens to mean is that any income that's derived by the super fund, you only pay 15% tax, and you've got some tax breaks that you could get in a self-managed super fund. You normally can't get inside an ordinary arrangement. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is that capital gains inside a super fund is much, much less, and there's two parts to that. If you were still in the accumulation phase, you hadn't retired, and you did sell an asset regardless of what it was, the maximum capital gains tax you could pay would be only 10%. Compared to what it might be
outside.
Outside in your own name. So there's a big saving there. But one of the real benefits and one of the strategies that we look at when we set up the self-managed super funds is it's meant to be a long-term thing. And that means for many people, they could sell an asset when they're eligible to go into the pension phase, which can be as young as 57. And when you do that, the assets that sit inside a super fund that are providing for your pension, then you pay zero capital gains tax.
Yeah, those are words I like.
Yep,
zero capital gains tax. And I think, Norm, and if our listeners take nothing away more than this point that you just brought up, is that it can be zero capital gains tax. So if you're a property investor, and after all, most of us want to do this because we're going to get a capital gain, to end up with an asset which we pay no tax on, that's a tremendous benefit.
It is, and the other thing that's really good too is if you've got properties into the pension phase, and a lot of our clients do, particularly when they've been paid off, because it's been a good thing, the income is tax-free also. So in the pension phase, zero capital gains tax and zero on the income side as well.
Yeah, well, that's a great gift. Okay, and then the next part we've got there is flexibility. You want to take us through that?
Yeah, flexibility is another big key aspect here, that you can change things around in the investment mix if you ever needed to, and you can do things that you normally couldn't do with an ordinary superannuation arrangement. Mm-hmm. So flexibility is a really big deal. As I said, once again, you decide the investments, you decide the strategy, and it simply gives you that feeling of control again.
Okay, excellent. And how about structure? What are we talking about there?
Yeah, inside the structure, once again, it just goes back to some of the, the more legalistic things that basically it is a trust, that every year that you need to submit a tax return and have the fund audited, and that's part of what we bring to the table. Our specialist compliance team on the SMSFs, that's what they do for people that we set up their self-managed super funds for. So just to recap, you set up these arrangements, these structures, you're liable as a director of the company and as part of the trustee, but all the hard work's done for you, but you sign off on it.
Okay. All right, and then lastly, buying capacity.
Yep.
Part of what MacArthur Group can bring to the table in this transaction is that if you are going to set up your own fund and you're going to want to invest in a property, you're going to need some borrowed funds. So we are a specialist mortgage broker, and we help people raise money to buy the investments of their choices. So that in itself, that ability to leverage. So for people that have own property outside of their super fund and perhaps have reached their capacity as far as what the banks is prepared to lend them, when they open up their own self-managed super fund, they have a new entity again, don't they?
That's exactly right. You raise a great point, because what it means is the super fund's borrowing the money, not the individuals.
Yeah.
So what they do outside of the super fund is not impacted by what happens inside the super fund, because the super fund borrows the money, the rent and the ongoing contributions pay down that loan.
And so the banks work the serviceability out on the 9.5% contribution and the rental income from the property, and determine whether or not that individual or that super fund can actually, what their borrowing capacity is. So it increases the overall borrowing capacity, doesn't it?
It does, and one of the things that happens with clients that we get to see, they've already been through that process, often with yourself, and that means that they know whether the super fund and what they want to do could actually borrow before you get that far.
Okay, so look, there are, as we've said to our listeners, that we're trying to do a War and Peace book summary here by skimming through some of the major aspects of running a super fund. But I think we can see from there's a lot of great reasons why people should consider running their own fund. Now, just on that, is that if our listeners are feeling like, this could be a good idea, then I really want to, Norma, I was just saying to somebody the other day that I've got a sign up in my office, and that sign says there's no such thing as a good idea unless it's developed and utilised.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if this is sounding to people like, this is sounds like a great idea. I mean, we've brought up a lot of good points here. What part of our offer here this evening is that we're prepared to do a one-on-one obligation-free assessment. That's one of the things that you do.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yep, and so what would happen in that assessment? You look at, for example, whether or not it could work for certain individuals.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I act as a little bit of a devil's advocate, because what I want to make sure is that the self-managed super fund DIY, it's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people. And we spoke before that 12-15% of the population, whatever it is now moving towards that. So and one of the reasons is that they've been matched, and that's exactly what we do. So we take them through a process to make sure their risk profile would handle having a self-managed super fund. They're prepared to put a little bit of time into it, that they want to be accountable, and we make sure that the leverage levels that they're looking at, we quiz them on that as well. And part of what we bring to the table when people want to do this is we stress test to make sure that the numbers work for them. Mm-hmm. So they walk away with that peace of mind, knowing that it's the right fit for them, the right amount of risk that they're prepared to take for the rewards that could come out of that, around about the right levels of this leverage, and to make sure that this arrangement is going to work for them. And part of what we also do to make it easy is that we then are able to move all their money out for them. We do all that paperwork and the back office stuff, so it's a pretty easy transaction and okay, transition to their new DIY.
Okay, because I imagine many people could be feeling that they don't want to get over their heads.
And that's something that we're really big on, to make sure that when people do this, that they don't get in over their heads. And sometimes we've turned people away because it really wasn't the right thing, particularly for younger people who don't have enough money. And we've got people walking with 100 grand and say, we want to go and do this and do that. It's just not feasible for them to do it. And we say, no, your plan is to actually make them into about 200, and then we can do something for you.
Okay, so it really is to get the best value out of for helping people decide whether or not it is for them. Is to simply have a consultation, have a chat.
And our role is to really look at the strategy. We have nothing to do with the property purchase, as you know. That's your field of expertise. But in this arrangement, you need two different skill sets. You need a specialist and experts in property, and you need a really good specialist team who can look after your fund, but also then bring to the table the technical wherewithal, and they've done it for a long time, and that's what we do.
Okay. All right, so let's just we had a look at some of the benefits, and obviously on the other side of the coin here is that there is some risk involved, and we're not going to sit here and try and gloss over those risks.
No, not at all.
No, because people need to go into this with their eyes wide open. So, look, there's what we've done here tonight, and we can see from our slide, is that we've just sort of centred on what we consider to be three of the main the main areas where it's where people need to be mindful of, and that first one is responsibility. And I know you've already been talking a little bit about that, but you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's on a couple of levels. Because the members are going to be basically the trustees of the fund, if you like, then the issue there is that you are responsible. You'll be signing off the tax returns, and it's not close your eyes. You actually need to know what's going on, and most people that we deal with, they want to take that on, because I want to be accountable, I want to know what's going on. The second thing is that they set the investment strategy. So basically they're going to stand by their investment decisions, and most people, when they get into this, that's really what they want to do. That's why they don't want to be part of the pack, part of the pool. I want to be responsible, so we set the investment strategy, and we know what investments we've got.
Okay. Now, obviously, people investing in property, or any asset class for that matter, there's always a danger that the market can fall.
That's exactly right. So you need to have a plan B. And people have said to me, well, what happens if I bought something and it didn't go the way it's supposed to? And I said, well, what would you do if it was an ordinary investment? They'd say, well, I'd consider it, and I'm either going to keep it or I'm going to sell it. So nothing changes. It's exactly the same. So, but basically, if we look at, say, shares or property that's been leveraged, anything that's been leveraged, it's great on the upside, but if it starts to fall, you then need to take that responsibility. And it goes back to the first part of really being responsible. You're managing that money. So it goes to the underlying heart. Is this still the right investment for us or not? But you've got to be mindful, because of the leverage, that it magnifies the good side, and it does the same when things aren't quite as well.
Yeah, look, I might even take that a little bit further, and I can almost say that you could probably guarantee that the market is going to fall.
That's exactly right. It's how it behaves. Is it meant to do that? And over time it goes up and it goes down, but the belief is over the time and over the life of the cycle of the investment, it's going to perform so that it's going to be better off than when you started.
So if I look at the Sydney market, the Sydney property market, as we're sitting here and almost midway through 2015, it's there's a likelihood that the Sydney market could not only just come off the boil but actually start to decline. I think that's a real possibility, and there are markets throughout the rest of the country that have yet to experience any upward growth. So I suppose that's something that people need to consider, is that the market, the timings, the cycles, and where the various property markets are in those cycles. And again, as you know, that's part of what MacArthur Group does, is that we look at all the markets around Australia. We're not what's our head office is here in Sydney, is that we've got a national-wide focus and trying to find what we could call the cold areas around the country. That is that not getting in at the top of the market, but trying to pick the market where it's at the bottom and then roll it out for a long-term period. And I say long-term, as you're well aware, we consider 10 years to be a suitable time frame. And again, that's something that people also need to keep in the back of their minds. That they get into this, it's a 10-year program, and that allows the fluctuations for the market can fall, can rise, but overall, we've got a growing population, and those people need to be housed somewhere, and providing these areas are suitable, cost-wise, have amenities. Investing in property in good locations, it's a pretty sure assurance that over the longer term that those properties will rise in value.
Well, the strategy you're talking about is the same as what we apply when we're investing for our clients. I don't have a view on property, as you know. I don't sell or recommend property. That's your bag. But you want to buy something that's relatively cheap. So you wouldn't be buying something
affordable.
It's affordable, that sort of thing, and it's of value. In other words, there's reasons to believe that it's going to grow. So going back to your point in Sydney, if you're buying something that's at the top of the market, then why would it be growing and meet your expectation? You'd be better off to go and buy something that was affordable and was in places where the market hasn't yet moved. And it's the same as when we're looking to put together share portfolios, we do exactly the same thing. So our philosophy's aligned, but you're right across what the property is, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, that sort of then brings us to that next point, that illiquidity of the property market, whereas as opposed to a share, you can call up a stockbroker and sell the share inside 24 hours. But property, obviously, because it's the long term, it's not that liquid. And that's, I suppose, one of the downsides of property investment.
Yeah, it is, but Don't forget, over time, it's more likely that if people buy property, they'll put something around that as well. But you're quite right. Any sort of long-term investment that's in property, it is going to be liquid, simply because you can't turn around and sell it tomorrow. Whereas with a share, you can sell it in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so as I say, I think those are the three key areas of the risk and reward. We looked at the benefits and looked at some of the downsides, and so people need to make up their own minds as to what they feel most comfortable with. But again, I'll go back to part of that assessment that we sit down and we help people work through these issues and make them aware of what all the things that can go wrong and also all the things that can go right.
Well, that's right. And one of the things that we do with some of our clients is that they often want to overweight into an asset class in shares, more shares than other things, so they don't diversify as much as they would traditionally, and that comes about the same with properties, because they believe in the asset, they've had it before, and they're very comfortable with it, and they understand how it behaves. So on that basis, that ticks the box for me, which is different from someone who's never had property before, never leveraged, wants to come in and go and buy something that's maybe not in their best interest.
Yep.
That's not what we do. So it's getting that your head around what's the right thing for you, and you've been educated.
Yeah. Okay. Now, best of both worlds, the slide we've currently got up at the moment. Now, I know Dennis spent a little bit of time telling our listeners who we were and what we were about, but I suppose as a bit of an advertisement and how we've come together here is that setting up, doing this particular project, and that is setting up your own self-managed super fund and then getting property inside your super fund, it is a combination of two different disciplines, from the financial planning field.
It is. They're independent of each other. So in other words, what you do, I've got nothing to do with, and you work with the client, and I'm on the other side. So we bring two very, very different skill sets here that people need.
Yeah. So for our listeners out there, is that by sitting down with both groups, what you will get is a turnkey solution. There's not a lot of work you need to do yourself. Both our organisations have been set up to help investors that want to set up their super funds, that want to get property inside it, but are time poor or don't know how to go about it, doing it themselves, or combination of both of those things.
That's right, and in our case we provide, if I can use the word independent, advice, so it has nothing to do with the property purchase, but we're testing to make sure the self-managed super fund's right, and when people want to do that, we then basically roll it out. So we have our lawyers that prepare all the documents, we provide the advice and make sure that this is right for them. We also then, of course, develop the investment strategy with the client to make sure that's right, the asset allocation, and then we do all the management and the setting up of the super fund and making sure that money comes from where they were before into their self-managed super fund so they can invest it the way they want to.
Yeah, and from our side, providing a property which is suitable for self-managed super fund, that is affordable, low maintenance, that has been well built and structural integrity. The last thing I think people want to be doing is buying an older home and then trying to renovate that home with limited funds in their self-managed super fund. Just a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and may not even work properly. So we can provide great property, or what we consider to be great property, and obviously our listeners will be the judge of that. We'll provide financing through that self-managed superannuation structure. We will manage that property, ongoing management team to look after the day-to-day rentals. Where, so again, that's not a thing that you need to worry about. So it's the term that we use is turnkey, from beginning through to end.
Yep.
And I think that just can minimise mistakes. And this does have the potential to. There's a lot of things to know. There's a lot of things that you've got to get right. The ATO can be pretty ruthless when things have been set up incorrectly. And obviously, I'd like to think we're aware of what the sort of things that can go wrong, and we can be ahead of the curve and basically allow people to get into this with the minimum of fuss and bother.
Yep, and the other thing too to remember, this being a long-term arrangement, is that people can, of course, move into the pension phase and still have property, as we spoke about before. So it's not like, oh, is this DIY thing only as good, until you get ready for retirement? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not into retirement as well.
Okay, Norm. Well, look, we're just about out of time here. So just a couple more key points I just want to finish up on for some people may just simply want to invest in a property outside of their super fund. Some people might want to invest inside their fund. Some people want to do both. What they can do, how they can do it, what their borrowing capacities are. These are all things that we can work out. Cash flows, as I'm talking about, risk and reward. There's all sort of things that we can do in an individualised assessment. And I'll just repeat that again. That it's we're quite happy to do that as an introductory meeting. There's no fee, there's no cost or charge or obligation for people meeting with us to get their head around whether or not it works for them. Now, as I mentioned, our head office here is in Sydney. It doesn't matter if you are interstate. We've got facilities here, almost like a sophisticated Skype, whereas we can meet you online. We do that every day. We're meeting investors all over the country, no matter where they are, and just doing it, via the use of technology, as we are through webinar here tonight. So it can all get quite simple, can't it, Norm?
Yeah, and we've got an office up in Brisbane as well. In fact, I'm jumping on a plane after this and getting up there. And so, yep, and it's the same as what Stephen said. If anyone wants to understand, what's involved with setting up the self-managed super fund, is it right for you? Then by all means, just get in contact with us as well. Okay,
so that brings us to really our last slide. I thank everybody for listening here today. If you have any questions, we got a whole bunch of questions through the registration process. We've tried to address them in the general narrative of our presentation here this evening. But if you have any further questions, just drop us an email there at inquiries@macarthurgroup.com.au, and either Norm or myself will make sure your queries get answered. And one last thing, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea, is that we're doing another webinar, and we're going to be doing that on the 24th of June. That seminar is called Mind Over Money, and it's about removing the mental blocks to wealth. Because, Norm, what that's all about is that our brains actually drive us crazy when it comes to making decisions like this. One half of our brain says, yeah, I want to do it, but the other half holds us back. And so there is literally an inner game of wealth that goes inside our heads. And so many of our investment decisions will come back to the beliefs and values that we have when it comes to money. And for many of us, those beliefs and values are shaped by our upbringing, by our parents, by our teachers, by our friends, and the decisions we make will be filtered through those values and beliefs. Now, for example, if you're brought up in a very wealthy family, you probably have a totally different attitude towards money and investing than perhaps somebody that was brought up in a lower to middle income family. And understanding your mindset will very, very much have a better understanding of the way you filter your information through, because your information, the way you filter it, will ultimately end in how you make your decision.
Yep, right. Makes sense.
So anyway, it's quite a fascinating topic, and so we're going to spend some time, around about a month's time. We'll be sending out an email to everybody that's listening here today about the time and date. But drop that into your diaries, the 24th of June, around about the same time as we're doing here this evening. And really hope you can join us for that one. So to wrap up, Norm, I thank you very much for your time here today. I think we've got through a lot of information in a hopefully what I feel is a pretty clear and concise way. Yep.
Absolutely, and thanks very much for having me along. And yeah, we'd really be very happy to take any inquiries and sit down with people and work out what's best for them.
Okay, and one last thing. We've also the seminar that we've just given. We're going to make that available to you by the way of a guide. So most of the information that we've covered off, we're just going to put a few finishing touches onto it, and we'll send you an email in the next few days with pretty much a summary of everything that we've gone over here this evening. So keep an eye out for your inbox for that coming through. So thank you again to everybody for listening, and we really do hope that we will be meeting with you soon. Thank you, Norm.
Thank you, Stephen.